Welcome to the second part of your introduction to tourism lesson, where I'll be talking about global tourist flows and go a bit more into detail of destinations and how they have grown over the years. First of all, the agenda is the aim and objectives, tourism generating regions, top emerging tourist destinations, the definition of global tourist flows, the nature of global tourist flows, events affecting global tourist flows, China and Disney workshop, and there's another discussion, and then there are obviously some references as well. The aim is to get an overview of the global tourist flows. And we do that by introducing the top emerging destinations, define tourism generating regions, define what global tourist flows are, and to look again a bit more at the events affecting global tourist flows. Now, before going into the more up-to-date figures, I just want to present to you the 2009 and destinations by top 10 destinations by arrivals according to the World Tourism Organization. France traditionally has been sitting on the number one spot for years, and this has to do with its positioning within Europe, as it's right slap bang in the middle, but also with its cultural offerings as a tourist destination. Spain is in second place, or was in second place in 2009, which is a very traditional tourist destination. The United States in third place, and it's bouncing back after the Bush administration, and China with 50 million in fourth place. And it's the world's fastest growing destination and could potentially be the most popular destination between 2015 and 2020, and I will show you in a minute why. The other destinations in 2009 were Italy in 5th, UK in 6th, Germany in 7th, Mexico in 8th, Austria in 9th, and Russia in 10th. And now I will show you the top 10 destinations for 2010, and you can see quite a few changes. Now, before I start, there is a difference between arrivals and receipts. Arrivals deals with people, and receipts deals with money coming into a destination. So how much does a destination get from people traveling there? So it doesn't mean that just because you're number one in arrivals that you're number one in receipts. Now, if you look at it, France is still number one. It slightly dropped the arrivals by 4 million, from 80 to 76.8, so by 3 million. The US are now number 2 and not number 3, and Spain has fallen to number 4, and China, interestingly, has climbed up to number 3 with the arrivals. So you can really see that China is picking up. The UK has stayed on number 6, and Germany has dropped down to number 8. Malaysia has come in, and Russia and some of the other destinations, Austria, have fallen off the radar. Italy has moved. Italy has stayed where it was, and it has an increase in arrivals as well. With regards to receipts, obviously the US, looking at the size of the country and how long people stay in the States probably as well, they are with 103.5 billion the main earner for tourism. If we look at the whole thing at arrivals, China has overtaken Spain in arrivals, and this again confirms the assumption that it's on its way to become the world's most popular destination within the next few years. And also China has overtaken Italy with regards to tourist receipts, so with regards to what people spend in a country. Again, I would say, even though China is probably cheaper, people stay longer, and probably spend a bit more money in the country as well because they are staying longer. Now, to look at this, and I think I mentioned this before, if you look at the top emerging tourist destinations, a lot of them are within Africa, Asia and Pacific, South America, and also Europe, which might be surprising, but I think I said this before as well, it's mainly Eastern Europe. And if you look at arrivals by purpose of visit, is that still we mainly go on holiday for leisure, recreation purposes. But also it's quite interesting to see how many people between 1990 and 2010, so in 20 years, how the arrivals have actually changed. So they've doubled in, sort of doubled in 20 years. Same with the business and professional, and also, obviously visiting friends and relatives, VFR. Health and religion is a lot of motivation for us to travel. And again, between 1990 and 2010, this is, has significantly grown from 48 million to 253.8 million. Um, Now, if you look at the definition of global tourist flows, it's basically it refers to the pattern of travel around the world. So basically, where people are traveling from, where they stay, and where they're traveling to. So basically, where do we come from and where do we travel to? And obviously with events and stuff going on, not just events as in Olympics and things like that, but any other major factors influencing the industry, obviously these tourist flows and to where we go change significantly as well. We said before that there has been a dramatic growth in international tourist arrivals since 1950. If you think about it, before you had the Second World War, and maybe not necessarily people having paid holidays or not having as much holiday and having other priorities than traveling. But since 1950, there has been a massive growth. And if you look at it, in 1950 there were only 15 countries that accounted for almost all arrivals. We didn't travel that far. Within Europe, we traveled within Europe. Within the Americas, people traveled within America. Or maybe they started traveling back to Europe to see their family they'd lost, maybe, during the wars. From Europe, people traveled to America to visit family that fled to the States, things like that. If you then look at it in 50 years, there was a 30% decrease of, for those countries. Rather than only having 15 countries fighting for tourists, they now had 70 countries attracting tourists. And then by 2001, 62% of 62% arrival to these countries. So again, there's a massive increase in destinations. And the World Tourism Organization estimates that by 2020, Europe only will attract 46% of international tourist arrivals. And it also says that this trend does not reflect a reduction in absolute terms, but rather the fact that expansion of tourism growth at a higher rate in new destinations and emerging areas. And again, this again makes the point that we do want to go to other places. We do want to see other new things. Europe is old, we've all been to America. We want to experience new cultures. Places are more accessible. Maybe places are cheaper as well. So now there is one thing though, and this is what Sean Williams say. There are three patterns of travel, which makes sense. One of them is polarity, and it basically means that international tourism is largely dominated by the industrialized world. So the flows are from developed to developed countries. So we want, when we go on holiday, unless we really want to do voluntary tourism or adventure tourism or something very specific, we go from our own comfort zone into another comfort zone, because why have the hassle of not having a relaxed holiday? Plus, we can afford to travel. Again, if you think about the African nations, people have other have other priorities, and then they're not able to travel because of wars and famine and things like that. Um, but that said, Asia and the Pacific region have become significant for international tourists. So again, there's a region that is developing tourism, even though most of that region isn't seen as a developed world. The second one is regionalization. So tourism is highly regionalized, and flows occur between well-defined regions. So, for example, within Europe, USA, and Canada, and Japan, and the East Asia region. So there's really the main regions that draw in the tourists. And then, even though Europe has lost arrivals, there is still the European dominance. And international tourism is concentrated within Europe. In the early 1960s, 70% of world arrivals went to Europe. And again, if you think about it, it's all to do with people having family here, going back to their roots, or the cultural offerings within Europe, and the variety of what Europe offers. However, since the 1960s, obviously the arrivals have fallen, as we said before, but the Eastern European regions have experienced a rapid growth. But again, China is marching on to become the top tourist destination by 2020. So what we experienced in Europe in the 1950s or 60s, we might now be experiencing in China. Now, obviously, we know that outbound tourism has been driven by emerging markets. Again, the recovery between 2009 and the end of 2010 has been faster in the emerging than in the advanced nations. So in the emerging nations, the arrivals have been 8% versus 5% in the advanced nations. And again, it probably has to do with the price. How people can afford to travel to these destinations. And also the emerging economies have also led the recovery in terms of growth and expenditure abroad. So again, despite being affected or potentially being affected by the recession, people were able to travel easier than we were here in the more developed nations. So arrivals were up by 6.6% worldwide, and again, you can just see that up 63 million compared to 2009, and 27 million pre-crisis in 2008. And in 2009, arrivals were down by, I think, just over 4% actually. There is this next slide where you can see some of the figures, and you can actually see some significant breaks here as well. So here you had the recession, the middle of the recession, so you really had massive problems. 2010, you can see the recovery again, and then 980 million in 2011. You had some other little breaks here in 2003 and obviously in 2000, a slight one in 2001 as well. So you can see how, despite being affected by certain events, it has steadily, the tourist arrivals have steadily increased over the past years. And then here are just some figures for the changes of tourist arrivals between December 2010 December 2011. Europe for once was actually the top performer with a 6% increase compared to 2010, where they had a slow recovery. Problems, we all remember the volcano, we all remember the snow, we all remember the problems in the Eurozone. Because of the volcano outbreak, there was only a moderate growth in April, however, much stronger growth in May and June. And you had some outstanding performances there as well. And then the Americas saw a growth. First time that 100 million mark in 2011 for the tourist arrivals. Africa quite steady. North Africa, obviously you had some losses due to what's going on there at the moment, but the sub-Saharan region has gained visitors. Asia, a growth, quite significant changes in arrivals there, and the Middle East saw a loss of 8%, and I think a lot of it has to do with it's lost its attraction. They had a massive crisis in 2009, and so a lot of stuff going on there as well. Yeah, just again, and this graph just shows you what actually happened in those years. So if you look at the 90s, you had the Asian financial and economic crises. You had in the 2001, 2002, 2003, you had the SARS, 9/11, the economic downturn, and again you had the Great Recession now recently, obviously, that where international tourist arrivals were in the minus here as well. And then just to compare your inbound tourism 2010 versus 2011, it might not look like a lot of changes, but again, the numbers rather than the percentages are significant here as well. If you just look at, the volume is the arrivals is faster than the incomes, and this is because people travel much closer to home, they look for shorter travel and value for money. There's also a steady recovery for the hospitality sector, and that's especially evident in the Asia and Pacific sector region, where growth is exceeded 20% in the city. So the hospitality sector is a massively growth sector within the cities in that region. Of course, natural disasters and all these things have short-term impacts, and you could see that in the changes in tourist arrivals and how quickly they recovered. And this is also confirmed by the 2010 quick recovery, that the tourism sector is in the long and medium term very resilient. And of course, if you look at 2010, there are loads of mega events that went on. So you had the Winter Olympics in Vancouver, you had the Shanghai Expo, FIFA World Cup in South Africa, and the Commonwealth Games in India. So again, those are places people travel to. So if you think about this year, you've got the Olympics here, you've got the Euro in the Ukraine and Poland. So again, you've got loads of events going on this year that can, will lead to the further recovery in tourism and the growth in arrivals. Now, some of the trends and some of the issues are still there. Is the high unemployment, even though destinations have set new records. Then you've got increase in taxes in a lot of countries, so that if you think of the Eurozone and of what's going on there and the issues there, and you think of Greece and all these countries that have massive problems. And then you've got, obviously, in order to stimulate recovery, it is massively important to look at regional and domestic travel, as they are the key driver for development. If you can't afford to go on a 2-week holiday abroad, you stay at home, and you might stay shorter. So again, it's up to the regions and to your own country to support recovery and to attract tourists and things like that. Then there is still the uncertainty over the global economic situation, and that affects consumer confidence, which then could hurt tourist demand, influences how much we spend and where we spend it. The demand shifts to domestic versus international travel. So again, more domestic travel, more shorter holidays, weekends, rather than staying away. But it depends, or it varies from country to country, because it depends on how badly a country is affected by the economic situation. And it's dependent on the local economy, the labor markets, and also the consumer confidence as to how majorly the impact is being felt. And just a list of other things that have affected the global tourist flows and will affect them again: conflict, oil crises, recessions, emergence of new destinations, consumer preferences, what do we want, and global warming. How does global warming affect us in the long term? Um, the thing to remember is, although tourism is easily affected by global events, it has proven to be a very resilient industry which recovers well and quickly from events. So again, short-term impact, but in the medium and long term, it's very resilient. And the outlook for 2012: slower recovery, slower growth. 1 billion international arrivals for 2012 are forecast, so we'll see that by the end of the year. 3 to 4% growth. I think last year was 4 to 5% growth forecast for 2011. And then it is expected that the tourism sector performs positively but weaker than last year. So as I said, last year was 4 to 5% growth predicted, which was actually what happened, but this year is only 3 to 4%. And then just the same thing as on the previous slide, just on the in a graph, and you can see what the changes were. So if you look at 2004, for example, 10.3% changes to, with regards to a negative year before, and the same here as well, where we are sitting now. And this is the 2020 vision. So this is where the arrivals will be by 2020. Just probably, I think I said 1.56 billion, so just under 1.6 billion are forecast for 2020. Obviously, these are the actual figures, and these are just forecasts. Whereas, although we do know that. Okay, now I set up, as I said before, I've set up a workshop for you, and there's a paper on there, and it's all about China, the world's fastest growing destination, and Disney. There's a handout on Moodle. Please populate the discussion forum. There are 3 questions you need to answer. In one of the later lessons, there's another part to this exercise as well. Please remember to comment on your colleagues' work as well and start a discussion. And the other discussion is explain how and why the traditional dominance of the world's major tourism generators and destinations is being challenged. So just a bit of a recap from this lesson. Okay, so maybe you can find some issues as well. Maybe you can find out do some research on this as well. Next week is face-to-face on Saturday, and just remember I need to finish a bit earlier, and I might just start at 9 o'clock as well, because I won't be able to get in until about 8:30, quarter to 9. I will also email you about this. And it's what we're going to do then is the key players in global tourism. So basically what your report is all about. And we will start doing some research, and I will talk about some of the key players, and you can choose your organization. There are the references. And that's it. And good luck, and I see you on the 28th of April.